This episode will see us exploring Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. After our amazing morning taking in the sights of Niagara Falls in New York State, it was time to get back on the road. Friday, August 31st, 2012, we had a 500-kilometer trip ahead that was going to be about 5 hours of driving. We saw our first giant traffic cone as we were leaving Niagara. In South Africa, we only have small ones. We later found out that these were called construction barrels, but nevertheless, it was quite a novelty to see one. And we'd heard that things are always bigger and better in the USA, so we thought, oh wow, it also applies to traffic cones. We were stuck in traffic at the time, so I hopped out of the car to pose next to one, which earned some strange looks from fellow commuters. We found a Walmart along the route and bought a small two-man tent so as not to repeat the previous night's unmanageable sleeping arrangements. We found a meat-free salad for lunch. You wouldn't think it would be that hard to find a vegetarian salad. Most of the salads had turkey, chicken, or bacon in them. Got back in the car, drove for a while, later found a rest stop, or services as they're called in the US, and stopped for our lunch. We drove through some vineyards and many cornfields, catching glimpses of Lake Erie, especially when driving through Cleveland. We arrived at the Wooded Acres campground, which seemed in the middle of nowhere, at 7 p.m. The man who'd been running the campsite for the last 31 years had never yet had South African visitors, so he was super excited to meet us. Our campsite was surrounded by beautiful natural forest with accompanying noisy bugs. We pitched our new tent in no time. We had a low-maintenance supper of bagels and bananas, and then we hung out at the air-conditioned games room to escape the heavy humidity as long as we could. There were no showers at this campsite, so we washed with wipes and went to bed at 9:30. Even though the bugs were loud, we had a great night's sleep after a pretty sleepless night the previous night at Niagara Falls campsite. We woke at 7 the next morning and had breakfast and were packed and ready to leave by 7:30 a.m. Because it was our plan to visit as many states as possible in this trip, we needed to drive a little out of our way to the north so that we could tick off the state of Michigan. There was a little town called Adrian, about 20 minutes north of the state line, so we decided to pay it a visit because it was my dad's namesake. We arrived in the main street at around 9 a.m. and being a Saturday morning with no stores open yet, it was very quiet. It was good to visit a town that we knew nothing about, and it didn't even feature in our Lonely Planet USA book. It forced us to rely on locals telling us what to do and what to see. We were told about the Kiwanis Trail, an 8+ mile trail between Adrian and the neighboring town of Tecumseh. It was a great spot for our morning run. It took us through thick natural forest and along a beautiful river. At Trestle Park, where we parked the car, we met a local who had never heard of South Africa or even Nelson Mandela. Maybe he just didn't understand our accents. We had a wash down and cool off using the wash basins at the park facilities and got back on the road. Before leaving the small town of Adrian, we visited the courthouse and some other Adrian landmarks. In 2018, we visited Michigan again in our road trip to check off the elusive North Dakota. Evan's dad and mom had spent some time in East Lansing in 1985 as a Methodist minister at a church there on a Methodist exchange. His mom had told us that there was a painting of his dad that had been given to them and displayed in the church. She was asking if we could try and track it down. We thought it was going to be an impossible task with an unlikely outcome, but it turned out to be an amazing story. We went into the church and had Evan's mom on the phone. She was trying to tell us where it had been displayed. While we were on the phone to her, we fortunately bumped into a custodian who recognized our description of the painting and knew he had seen it somewhere. The church had been remodeled since 1985, and he thought he'd seen it in a storeroom. He patiently took us with him as we searched what felt like every room in the rather large building with no luck. We bumped into the secretary, who thought she might know where it was, as she had seen something fitting the description recently. We followed her to what seemed like the last remaining unlikely place, and there it was. It was quite amazing to see it, because we'd heard it described so many times by Evan's mom, and to see it in real life was quite an experience. We asked them if there was any way that we could take the painting with us or buy it from them, but they didn't have the authority to let us know. They said they'd find out for us. We were pleased to have seen it in real life and took lots of photos of it. We even tried to put it in the same place that the painting was modelled on and take pictures there. We had great fun with the people. They were very helpful. They later emailed us to let us know that we could actually have it. After our visit to the church, we got back on the road with 2 stops at places with fun names, Kalamazoo and Paw Paw. Both were unplanned stops, but when places have such fun names, we often feel the need to stop. And then we drove on to Indiana Dunes State Park and camped there. We only drove through Indiana in 2012, so it was time to stop and explore. The park is located on the southern shores of Lake Michigan. We set up our newer model, larger tent, and enjoyed watching fireflies light up the night as we ate our supper. We woke up that morning and had planned a run along the shores of Lake Michigan. It was terrible. The scenery was amazing, but we were being attacked by black flies. Coincidentally, there was a half marathon along part of the route that we were running, and the organisers were handing out bug spray. So we used bug spray, but the black flies seemed to be slightly immune to the bug spray, and we continued getting attacked and bitten. We ran back to our campsite, packed up, and headed for the beach for a while. As we were driving to the beach, we saw what looked like a turtle crossing the road, and we wanted to make sure that it got across safely. So we stopped our car. Someone else had also stopped their car, and we were about to go and help with this turtle when a park ranger came rushing up and saying, don't touch it, it's a snapping turtle, you'll get bitten." So we were gratefully saved by the park ranger, who had the right method of picking up this turtle and relocating it to the other side of the road. After that, we got to the beach and spent some time soaking up some rays before getting back on the road to visit friends who we planned to visit in Chicago. Okay, now back to the 2012 road trip. After visiting Adrian, we got back onto the road for a 530-kilometer, 7-hour drive to Kenosha in Wisconsin. We had some more issues with our navigation and had to rely on road signs. We were worried about finding our friend's place in the suburbs, but amazingly, our navigation revived itself just in time to find their place. We struggled a little bit with the numbers of the houses as they didn't seem to be consecutive, so we drove around their little development for a while before finding their place. We arrived just in time to join them for a visit to the Willow Creek Community Church, a huge mega church. We were fortunate that Stephen Curtis Chapman, one of the musicians that Evan and I had listened to in our youth, was performing and shared an incredible testimony. The church facility was absolutely gigantic. We've never been in such a big church venue before. After that, we returned to our friends and enjoyed stir fry and caught up chatting late into the night. So between our 2012 and our 2018 road trips, we got to experience a little of Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. We didn't get to spend too much time in any of these states, but we're glad to be able to tick them off the giant checklist of 50 states and to enjoy some of the sights that they had to offer.